So, welcome to the next episode of the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. This session is about Exchange Hybrid, what, why, and how. And my name is Stensitzki, and I will introduce myself a little bit later. First of all, the name change. The SharePoint conference is now the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference and will take place in March 2021. So are you interested in getting one of those three fine and nice Oculus Quest all-in-one devices? And if you're ready for a raffle, just submit your answers. Use the short link in the lower section of the slide. And as you know, this is a free event, and we encourage you to consider donating to one of those two charity relief funds. Please do so. And we need to say thank you to all our generous sponsors for this event. But let me first introduce myself. So I'm Stensitzki from Germany, coming live to you on this 36-hour marathon on Microsoft 365. I'm an expert, so to speak, and the owner of a consulting company, Granicus, here in Germany. I'm an Office Apps and Services MVP and a Microsoft trainer, region lead 1 out of 6 for Germany, covering all related issues coming to worldwide learning with Microsoft. And I'm an author in a book on, you guess what, Exchange Server 2019. That's where my technical background is. This on Exchange Server, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365, and the related topics left and right that are required to get Microsoft 365 up and running properly. You can reach out to me via LinkedIn or even Twitter if you do have any additional questions regarding this talk. Feel free, do not hesitate, just contact me. You will see the contact information right after this session. So what can you expect out of this session? I will talk about what is Exchange Hybrid, and more importantly, why you need Exchange Hybrid, and how you implement Exchange Hybrid properly, just to have it up and running and working in a consistent manner between Exchange Online and your Exchange on-premises environment. At the very end, as a backup slide, you will find the sources and additional links on the topics that we will cover in this session. So, implementing Exchange Hybrid is simple. Well, this is a quote said by some undisclosed Exchange consultant. If you have ever tried to implement Exchange Hybrid, well, it's anything but simple. Let's get into what is Exchange Hybrid. First of all, why do we want to go hybrid? So first of all, we want to use Exchange Online, which is built on 24 years of market-leading innovation, which provides a pretty good infrastructure for hosting your mailboxes and your employee mailboxes. It's a very production collaboration solution which tightly integrates with Microsoft Teams, Outlook, and even SharePoint. And with 100 gig mailboxes, well, you get pretty much of mailbox space, which you will never ever provide to your end users in your on-premises environment. So that's one of the reasons why we want to get into hybrid mode. But what is Exchange Hybrid for real? Technically, we do have two different Exchange environments. So there is this Exchange Online and your on-premises environment. The hybrid configuration creates a sort of a trusted relationship between those two. So you can think of it as two technically and physically environments that act as one. So this trust relationship is the base that is needed so that all of the messages are exchanged and sent between those two environments are seen as internal. And there are two components. There are two components to the hybrid infrastructure. This is client access based on the HTTPS protocol, and there's mail flow. So hybrid is not only just mail flow, it's client access and mail flow. And this is where the different approaches for selecting the proper hybrid configuration come from. And the hybrid configuration itself is activated and configured using the hybrid configuration wizard. What the hybrid configuration wizard is, we'll see in a minute. So what are your hybrid benefits? Why do we want to use the hybrid configuration? You get free busy lookups for mailboxes that are hosted either in the Exchange Online infrastructure or in Exchange on premises. You're not required to recreate any Outlook profiles when you move mailboxes between the two environments. That is one of the most important benefits because there's no interruption for your end users. And you can seamlessly connect between your on-premises environment and Exchange Online. You get a single global address list. The mail flow between those two environments is secure. You leverage hybrid modern authentication. Why this is important, we'll see when we talk about the requirements for Microsoft Teams implementation. And for example, you get cloud-based archiving. So for example, you can stay with the primary mailboxes on premises and use just cloud-based archiving and much more. So as you've seen, hybrid configuration for Exchange is simple, right? Let's see. So we have the hybrid configuration itself, which differentiates in two variants. We do have a classic mode, which comes with three different modes, an express, minimal, and full hybrid. And we do have the modern hybrid configuration, which comes at least in two different flavors, in minimal and full. So at least you do have two variants to choose from, and after all, 5 different modes are for operating of the hybrid configuration. Still simple, right? Isn't it? Let's see. What's classic full hybrid? That's a full stack where, based on having Azure AD Connect in place with the Exchange hybrid mode enabled. Just as a reminder, enabling Exchange hybrid mode with Azure AD Connect does not enable or configure any Exchange hybrid configuration. This is done executing or running the hybrid configuration wizard. First, you have two choices for secure mail flow between Exchange Online and your Exchange on-premises infrastructure. Normally, you would set up an edge transport role in the perimeter network to terminate the SMTP connection, the incoming SMTP connection from Exchange Online in the perimeter network, and then routing the accepted emails to your internal infrastructure, which requires an additional public IP address, a dedicated hostname where Exchange Online can connect to, and a dedicated TLS certificate, which maps to the hostname that you've selected for your inbound traffic. If you do not want to implement an edge transport server in your perimeter network, you can choose option B, which is a direct connection, SMTP connection from Exchange Online, bypassing a perimeter network to your internal Exchange organization. What about HTTPS? Your internal Exchange servers are published to the internet using a reverse proxy, enabling Exchange Online to create an inbound HTTPS connection to your web application proxy, and then then the connection is being forwarded to your internal Exchange servers. Just a classic setup, which we have done for years, pretty established standard for any Exchange or any new Exchange version. The internal Exchange organization must be able to connect to Exchange Online. So you do have an outbound connection from all of your Exchange servers to Exchange Online. I've decided to use a plain outbound connection, not using any sort of outbound proxy, because outbound proxy just add to network complexity, not providing any additional security benefits. So you just have a single outbound connection from all of your internal Exchange servers to Exchange Online. Especially those inbound connections for HTTPS and the requirement to have this inbound connection is something where companies struggle due to the security regulations and such. So this is where modern full hybrid kicks in, and you will see the difference between classic hybrid and modern full hybrid in a moment. Again, modern full hybrid is based on Azure AD Connect with Exchange Hybrid enabled, just to synchronize any Exchange-related attributes to Exchange Online. There's not much of a change when it comes to mail flow requirements. So still, mail flow requires the edge server in the perimeter network or the direct connection between Exchange Online and your on-premises. As you see, the connection is for both directions. But now comes the difference. The inbound connection from Exchange Online, the inbound connection from Exchange Online to your on-premises organization is handled using something called the Exchange Hybrid Agent. The Hybrid Agent is a component which is installed by the Hybrid Configuration Wizard on your local Exchange servers. The agent creates an outbound connection, as you can see in this diagram, connects to Exchange Online, and receives any request from Exchange Online from a service queue running in the cloud. So again, the agent creates an outbound connection to Exchange Online, receiving inbound requests from Exchange Online to your on-premises Exchange organization. So this is not the communication flow required from your internal Exchange servers to Exchange Online. So your internal Exchange servers still require an additional outbound connectivity to Exchange Online. But as you can see, for HTTPS connections, you do not have a requirement for an inbound connectivity. This is the main difference from modern full hybrid compared to classic full hybrid. Now, let's see what are the use cases for the different modes of operation for Exchange Hybrid. Let's start with the classic mode. You do have the full classic mode, which is the configuration where you have the most hybrid functionality available. So that's the classic full hybrid configuration. Exchange servers are published to the internet. They are publicly accessible from Exchange Online for SMTP and HTTPS protocol. This mode of operation is for a permanent hybrid operation. The minimal classic hybrid is a hybrid setup without rich coexistence, so to speak. So no FreeBSD lookups from Exchange Online to your on-premises mailboxes, because the overall goal for the minimal hybrid is to migrate all mailboxes from your on-premises infrastructure to Exchange Online. So with minimal hybrid, you end up in a temporary hybrid operation for a few weeks or month. So this is the minimal classic hybrid you would choose when you have, for example, 1,000 mailboxes, but your overall goal is to migrate all of the mailboxes. If you have just a few mailboxes to migrate to Exchange, and you can use the classic Express, which comes as a dedicated setup. So it comes as an Azure AD Connect Express configuration. If you know the Azure AD Connect Express setup and the settings, you know that this requires a full synchronization of your local Active Directory to the Azure AD. And the overall idea of the Express Classic Hybrid is for a temporary hybrid operation for just a few days or weeks. So if you do have just a few mailboxes to migrate, this is your choice to make to migrate all mailboxes pretty quickly to Exchange Online. So full modern hybrid is for permanent hybrid operation as well, but comes with reduced hybrid functionalities, and not all of the hybrid functionality is available with full modern hybrid, but you do not have a requirement for inbound HTTPS traffic, as shown a few slides before. And there's a fifth mode of operation that is modern minimal. Again, this is a temporary hybrid operation for a few weeks a month with the overall goal to move and migrate all mailboxes to Exchange Online. So if you want to go implement a permanent hybrid operation, you have to make a choice which kind of a full hybrid operation you want to use, classic or modern. To help you make a decision, we'll come to the requirements for Exchange and Microsoft Teams in a moment. So why do you need Exchange Hybrid? It's for the coexistence between on-premises Exchange organization and Exchange Online, mailbox migration to or from Exchange Online. Keep in mind that you can offboard from Exchange Online as well. So moving mailboxes to the cloud and from the cloud to your on-premises environment is a pretty easy thing to do. And you do need hybrid if you want to use Microsoft Teams and have user mailboxes that are in your on-premises environment. So without a hybrid configuration, you won't be able to use Microsoft Teams and have the mailbox calendar show up in Microsoft Teams. You would use the hybrid configuration as well if you do want to perform a full transition from your on-premises Exchange to Exchange Online and to provide an optimal migration experience for your end users. This is from a business side, one of the most requested things that the profile reconfiguration of Outlook does not take place. Hybrid configuration is for mail flow requirements, a pretty interesting thing, because with a hybrid mail flow in place, you can still leverage your on-premises mail components that are in your mail out connection flow integrated. So for example, if you do have some sort of a mail gateway solution providing S/MIME encryption, decryption, a component which applies different email disclaimers to outbound emails, some sort of archiving, journaling in place. Hybrid Mailflow supports that you can still leverage those components even if the mailbox is hosted in an Exchange Online mailbox. Because any outbound email from Exchange Online mailboxes is routed to your on-premises mailbox using the same email routing mechanism and mail flow that is for internet targeted email configured. So, and hybrid mail flow keeps or lets you use a last or a single Exchange server on premises to provide email services for any legacy application in your on-premises environment. For example, that you have an application server that does not or is not supposed to have direct internet access, can leverage an on-premises Exchange server as an email relay sending outbound messages to Exchange Online. Another requirement could be that you do have legacy applications or legacy systems, so to speak, that do not support a modern TLS connection security. Because any outbound SMTP connection for sending emails to Exchange Online now requires TLS 1.2, and any other, let's say, multi-function devices for printing or scan to email as an example, or say any notification email system, for example, for uninterrupted power supply systems, any other older component that do not support modern TLS security schemes would not be able to send outbound emails directly to Exchange Online. Therefore, you provide an internal relay system for those components. And more or less the same as if you have all those systems that do not support any kind of user authentication for sending emails. Let's talk about Exchange Hybrid and Microsoft Teams. The last weeks and months within the Microsoft Teams adoption, one of those issues that occurred was that the users were able to use Teams, but they were not able to see their personal calendars in Teams. So any meetings, well, they weren't even able to see those meeting invites in their personal calendar. The calendar plainly did not show up. Reason being is that most of those Exchange infrastructures on premises were just plain old. They were on Exchange 2013, 2010, or even older. So there's a dedicated requirement for Exchange Server 2016 or 2019 as a hybrid endpoint, reachable from Microsoft Teams backend services for connecting to on-premises mailboxes for Teams users. The reason is that Microsoft Teams uses something called Auto-Discover version 2 for connecting to the Exchange Server, fetching all required information where the mailbox is hosted. The requirements state that you should have at least 2019 RTM or Exchange Server 2016 Cumulative Update 3, which in May 2020 is already out of support. So stay with the latest Exchange Server Cumulative Update for either 2016 or 2019. Your Exchange Server endpoint that is published to the internet should use a third-party official TLS certificate. Please avoid using any kind of enterprise certificate authority issued certificate or even a self-type. So the endpoint must provide a third-party TLS certificate which can be validated. And the endpoint must be configured for hybrid modern authentication, which is OAuth v2. There's the links on how to configure and about the requirements are in at the very end of this slide deck. And another important thing is you need to have the proper auto-discover DNS resource records for the SMTP domains for those users published in your external DNS servers. Because Teams relies on proper auto-discover process to find the Exchange Server endpoints. So how do we implement Exchange Hybrid? First of all, you need to know before you run the hybrid configuration wizard the different hybrid variants and modes, because hybrid configuration wizard requires you to make a decision for configuring the hybrid setup, the hybrid configuration object in your on-premises and the Exchange Online environment. Therefore, you must know what is your target operation mode. Do you want to go into a permanent hybrid or just a temporary hybrid for offboarding your mailboxes to Office 365? Yeah, and you have to have your on-premises Exchange organization in good shape, so to speak. Before you run a hybrid configuration wizard, please update your Exchange infrastructure to the latest cumulative update available for the version that you use. Before you run the hybrid configuration wizard, you can use the remote connectivity analyzer provided by the product group to verify that remote connectivity to your on-premises environment is active, up and running. By the way, you can only use the remote connectivity analyzer if you have not already limited the access to your internal endpoints with any network restrictions on your firewall. Please implement any network-related limitation on your firewall after you've tested and after you've set up a properly working hybrid configuration, not before. Yeah, your public IP addresses should be configured, DNS routing should be in place, all the required DNS resource records are set up, because the hybrid configuration requires that Exchange Online is capable of resolving and accessing the inbound endpoints when using classic hybrid. And using edge transport servers, it's very important that the edge SMTP TLS certificate is available in a certificate store on one of your internal Exchange servers. Reason being that the hybrid configuration wizard needs to have access to the certificate thumbprint to configure Exchange Online. Due to the dependencies for securing the communication between your internal Exchange servers and the edge transport server, it is very important that this certificate is only available in the local certificate store of Windows, but it is not enabled for any Exchange service. Just install the certificate using the classic certificate management console, but do not enable it for any Exchange service. The hybrid configuration wizard does have some requirements of its own, so you can run the current release of Exchange configuration wizard with Exchange Server 2010 as P3 using the latest update rollup, or 23rd Exchange 2013, 2016, or Exchange Server 2019. Again, the supported cumulative update is the current released cumulative update and the CU before. So just the last two CUs are supported. The hybrid configuration is a so-called click-to-run application, which requires that you access the download link as shown here, so the AKMS hybrid wizard, which initiates the download and the setup as a click-to-run setup, and the file extension of the hybrid configuration with the application file extension must be mapped to Internet Explorer, which is a pretty thing when executed or accessed using Windows Server 2019, because it's by default it's configured using a file selector. You might change the file mapping for this extension in the Windows operating system settings to make it work. And keep in mind, the current version of hybrid configuration is version 17. If you've downloaded the hybrid configuration wizard a few weeks ago, you might have downloaded the version 16. When you run the hybrid configuration wizard, the version is shown in the upper right corner of the window. So version 17 does not uninstall the previous version automatically. Please uninstall version 16 manually before you install HCW version 17. Both can coexist on the system. There's not much of a technical issue, but you cannot differentiate the two by using the icon or when you start those in using the start menu. It's just good housekeeping to uninstall version 16. And for remote PowerShell sessions, watch out for something that I discovered with a customer set up last week. Ensure that the Windows Remote Manager, the WinRM service, is up and running. It's not disabled, and that additional settings for this service are not controlled by group policy in your Active Directory. Otherwise, you might end up with, well, some fancy errors executing the hybrid configuration wizard. So let's dig into what is where to watch out for when running the hybrid configuration wizard. As mentioned, in the upper right corner, you see the most current version that you've downloaded. As the hybrid configuration wizard checks Every time that when you start up the hybrid configuration wizard, it checks if a new version is available. If a new version is available, it will automatically download, install, and use the most recent version. This is a pretty good thing because the product team behind the hybrid configuration analyzes hybrid configurations taking place and fixing any errors or any odd behaviors in the hybrid configuration wizard. Therefore, you might encounter a situation where on a Monday you run into an error with hybrid configuration wizard, close it, just try it again on Thursday or even Friday, and as you see that a new version is being downloaded, maybe it just is, the error is fixed and you can run and execute the hybrid configuration wizard successfully. So the first thing that the hybrid configuration does after the update is installed, it checks to find the optimal Exchange server for the configuration. In this example, I've decided to use a dedicated Exchange server instead of the optimal one. So you can either use the one detected by HCW or just enter a full qualified domain name for the Exchange server that you want to use. Another thing that you must decide on is where is your Office 365 environment hosted. For most of the implementations, it will be Office 365 worldwide. So the drop-down just shows the other dedicated services, let's say for the Office 365 with VNet 21 in China or the different government clouds available. Target infrastructure done. After you've selected the internal on-premises Exchange server and your Office 365 infrastructure, the hybrid configuration wizard wants to connect to both environments to fetch the current configuration. For the on-premises environment, it uses the currently logged on Windows user. You can change this if you want. Maybe your currently logged on Windows user does not have the proper permissions in the Exchange organization. And you do have to provide the Exchange Online account, which is either a cloud-only account for Exchange Online or a synchronized administrative account, which then authenticates using ADFS or pass-through authentication. The account used for Exchange Online can be protected using multi-factor authentication, so nothing to worry about here. Adjust the credentials as needed for both of the environments. This is one of the steps where you need to ensure that the Windows remote management service is configured to support basic authentication. If it doesn't, you will receive an error and you have to reconfigure it first. If you've provided the correct credentials for both environments, everything's good. So the gathering the configuration information just succeeds for both environments, and the configuration wizard will move on and query you for additional decisions. Otherwise, you are required to fix the issues encountered, because without reading the current configuration for your on-premises environment and Exchange Online, the HCW won't know what to do, because you can use the hybrid configuration wizard not to configure, but to change configurations. First decision to make is if you want to go minimal hybrid, which is the recommended setup, or to go full hybrid. Another option, which is totally optional, is the transfer of the current organizational settings of your on-premises Exchange infrastructure. So there are certain settings and policies that will be transferred after hybrid is configured successfully from your on-premises Exchange organization to Exchange Online. As stated, it is a one-time transfer. So there's no synchronization of the Exchange configuration in place. So after the initial setup, or transfer from your on-premises Exchange organization to Exchange Online, you have to maintain 2 Exchange environments. In this example, I have chosen to use the Exchange Modern Hybrid topology. So not classic, but modern, because the funny thing is that as soon as you select the modern hybrid, the setup for the hybrid agent will take place automatically in a moment. You need to provide additional credentials for the migration endpoint. So this is the account used by Exchange Online to connect to your on-premises environment for migrating mailboxes. This is a so-called migration endpoint user account. In this example, I've used the administrative account, which you shouldn't do in a production environment. Just create an additional migration account, which after migration is finished, you can just plain disable. Right after entering the credentials for your endpoint, the hybrid configuration will automatically start to download 2 components for the hybrid agent. First of all, the hybrid updater agent. This is a component which will regularly check if a new version of the hybrid agent is available. And as the name says, it will automatically update the hybrid agent. So you will always have the most recent version of the hybrid agent in place. As you see, after the hybrid updater is installed, download of the hybrid agent will take place. And when everything is good, you will have 2 new additional components on this very server that you're just executing a hybrid configuration wizard on. So next decision to make is very important, because this is where you make a decision on how mail flow will take place. The hybrid mail flow can either be, or by default, the hybrid mail flow sends all outbound messages to the internet from your on-premises infrastructure to Exchange Online, and then any outbound messages to internet will then leave the Exchange Online infrastructure using Exchange Online protection. This is even the mail flow when using an edge transport server in your perimeter network. But what about that's fancy centralized mail flow that I mentioned before? If you want to configure your centralized mail flow, let's remember, centralized mail flow is any outbound message from Exchange Online mailboxes is routed to your on-premises mailbox, then to your on-premises smart host, and then to the final destination. You need to click the Advanced button. And after you've clicked Advanced, a new setting shows up, which is the Enable Centralized Mail Flow, which you need to enable to have some so-called quote-unquote reverse mail flow from Exchange Online to your on-premises organization. The hybrid configuration wizard will configure the receive connector, so how messages are received from Exchange Online. You have to make you have to select the Exchange server that will host this server. Then you have to make a decision on where the send connector, so the messages sent from your on-premises organization to Exchange Online, are hosted. And in this case, if an Edge server is present in the or subscribed to the Active Directory side, you can select the Edge server. This is a step where you have to select the transport TLS certificate. The TLS certificate and its thumbprint is configured to secure the mail flow between on-premises Exchange and Exchange Online. Because Exchange Online as a software as a service environment for a vast number of tenants must make a decision or must be able to identify your organizational internal messages. Because normally your on-premises Exchange servers might send to other tenants which are hosted in Office 365 as well. And those messages must be treated as external or anonymous. But messages sent from your internal organization to your tenant must be treated as internal or authenticated. That's the reason why we need to have a dedicated mail flow channel between those two organizations. And this is done using a dedicated transport certificate for the transport connection, SMTP connection with between those two organizations. And a single label or single name or a single common name certificate is not that expensive, but provides an additional layer of security for the mail flow. And as mentioned before, if you're using edge transport, to have a hybrid configuration wizard be able to read the certificate and fetch the thumbprint, the certificate must be accessible in the certificate store of any of the internal Exchange servers, because you can select one of those internal Exchange servers and fetch any certificate that is accessible in the certificate store on that selected server. Again, because I've seen it in the past, do not enable a certificate from an edge server for any internal Exchange service. Please don't. Last thing to do is that you must enter the fully qualified domain name for the endpoint that is used for incoming messages. So in this example, Exchange Online would connect to a host name called mail0365@labs.de for establishing inbound SMTP connection. And would be a good behavior that this host name would match the common name of the certificate used. This is just good behavior for complying with SMTP RFC standards. Yep, that's mostly it. We're ready to update. When you click update on this very screen, just update and wait. And you're good to go. Okay, it might happen that something fails. In this case, the hybrid configuration wizard provides you with a full readable text log file with all the steps configured. So you can even see all the PowerShell commands used for configuration and the full exceptions that occurred for this very error to happen. Our configuration steps are documented. Again, this is a good idea to use the remote connectivity analyzer because it helps you to test inbound mail flow as well. And most reasons why something does not work when configured in a hybrid configuration wizard is remote connectivity. Check your firewall logs if there's any connection or any dropped. Check your proxy settings. Check your DNS settings. Especially your internal DNS settings. It might be that some external domain or host names for Office 365 are not properly resolved if there are limitations in place with internal DNS servers. Seen it. And Windows remote management server configuration issues. Verify the log files of the Windows log files of the server you're running hybrid configuration wizard on. And do not forget, after all, Exchange Server 2010 is end of support in October. It got extended from January this year. October 13th, 2020. That's it. That's the final date for Exchange Server 2010. If you're still running Exchange Server 2010, it's time to move on to Exchange Server 2016 or 19, or better, to Exchange Online. I'd like to say thank you. This is the contact information on the slide deck where you can reach out to me if you do have any additional questions in regards to the hybrid configuration wizard. Thank you for joining. Please provide feedback and event feedback. Looking forward to hearing from you again. This is the resources deck, and the deck will be available right after the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. We have 2 questions just showing in the question and answer.
Okay, there.
Go from here and have a look.
Absolutely. Let's see. So the first question is, what's the requirement for getting the calendar option in Teams? Do the user mailboxes need to be on Exchange Server 2016 level? So the hybrid endpoint, which is reachable from the Microsoft Teams backend, must be Exchange Server 2016 or 2019, because that's the connectivity endpoint from Teams to the local on-premises infrastructure, and the mailbox itself can be hosted on 2013 or 2010, but it shouldn't be any older because this is the only supported scenario. You can't have a 2019 endpoint with 2010 on place, so it must be 2016 or 2019. And RDS. Second question is, I have an RDS environment with Outlook and Teams. Exchange version is 2010. I thought I have to update Exchange first to get to the Teams meeting and for Outlook, but now some users say they have the option in Outlook and some not. Do you have an explanation? That's a good one. No, I do not have an explanation for that one, because you're talking, saying that the same Outlook version on the same RDS environment, there's there aren't any different versions of Outlook within the RDS environment, right? And nevertheless, I'd definitely say that, no, excuse me. Are you sure that the users having that Outlook add-in do not have, by mistake, received a configured Exchange Online mailbox? Just as an explanation, because there are many different reasons why that add-in would show up. That would be, are they able to create an Outlook? So sorry for not having an answer, but coming up with additional questions. Just reach out to me after the call, so contact information had been available. Hope you can see this. Let's see, let's just go back here and just reach out to me by email or by Twitter. Okay. We still have 3 minutes, so I just see that there are additional questions. The recordings will be available, will be made available after this event, so they do have to get through some editing. And does enabling hybrid modern auth allow you to enforce Azure multi-factor authentication for Outlook clients? Yes, it does, but in this regard, for hybrid, the modern auth is especially for server-to-server authentication between Microsoft Teams backend and the on-premises Exchange environment. But if you use modern auth, you can enable MFA for Outlook clients as long as you're using the most recent version of the Outlook clients. Another one, by default, after HCW setup, free busy information should be available between on-premises online users. Yes, if you use either modern, so free busy depends on full hybrid, either modern or classic. Another one, so still a minute to go. Do you need licenses for the hybrid servers? Classic consulting answer, it depends. Hybrid servers you must license a hybrid server if you're using an Exchange 2016 and use it as a coexistence server with not hosting any user mailboxes on this coexistence server. You can use a license, a free license, which is available by a tenant. If the HCW will license request the license from your tenant and license this 2016 server. If you're using 2019, 2019 is not supported for a free license. A coexistence server for Exchange Server 2019 must be licensed. Resources. Yeah, the resources links are part of the slide deck, which is published as part of the recording and in the on the event site right after the event. Okay, yeah, it's absolutely in regard to the RDS questions. Yes, please contact me. So resource links are available after this in the slide deck. So again, thank you.